Okay, it's 10 after, so I'm gonna start. Good evening. My name is Matthew Ridgway. I'm the owner of the former Sonic fast food restaurant, and I guess before that, even in the mid '80s, it was a Chevron gas station. Um, and we purchased that site, my wife and I, with the hope that we can get entitled to build a cooperative housing facility on that lot. We've had a long time passion, a couple decades of wanting to build a cooperative housing development, one in which we and our adult children, if they choose to join us, and our parents, if they choose to join us, and other friends and family, if they choose to join us, can all live in community with one another. The idea being that we can look after one another. The units themselves are small, as Otto Condon, our architect, will get into a bit, but large common spaces to hang out. But we're not anticipating that we're going to occupy all the units. We're proposing to develop 12 to 13 units, and I think we would occupy maybe half of them. And so we are hoping that others will join us in community as well. Our goal is to build something that, as I said, sort of is the sort of thing where people's actual units are relatively small, and then we have large common spaces that we do certain things like have meals together, maintain the space together, have community gardens as part of the development that we all cooperate, co-maintain. We would like to build it in as ecologically responsible a fashion as we can. So we're proposing to use renewable resources as part of the construction. We're also proposing photovoltaic or solar on the tops of 2 buildings. The total development is 3 buildings in total, and so the 3rd building would also then have a roof garden where we're hoping to grow food for ourselves and others in our community. We're also hoping that this is going to be as affordable as possible. It's expensive to develop, but it's our goal to try to build spaces that, as I said a couple times now, are relatively small, and also to build from materials that don't have some of the cost factors, and so keep the units as affordable as we can. We will also be meeting the city's inclusionary housing requirements, but even beyond that, we're hopeful that the units that aren't specifically designated as low income or very low income, that all units are as affordable as we can make them, for the sake of our own selves and we would like our children to be able to afford to live here, and so forth. In terms of process, we have not yet filed an application with the city. So we did some due diligence work as part of acquiring this property, and that's what we're going to be showing, is the work that we've done to sort of develop concepts on what could happen on this site. We are hoping to file an application with the city, but we really would like to hear from the community members about either reactions to the proposal that we put together as part of the due diligence work, or just more generally thoughts and dreams and aspirations for what this site might be, whether it relates to the uses or the appearances, or we're just open to hearing what it is people want to go on this site. We are in a part of the process that is sort of self-driven. So once we actually file an application with the city, we'll have a public process that's mandated by the city. We're not there yet. So all the public process that we've done to date, if you've been by the site, you've seen that my son Taylor, who's on the phone here, went and painted the windows. We've got a 890.coop.com website that's been up for a couple of months, well, maybe 6 weeks. And then we've got, we sent mailers out to anybody who lives within 1,000 feet of the development.
1,000 feet?
1,000 feet, yeah.
No, I didn't get one. Okay.
Oh, sorry. It was a data set or mailing list that we got from the city, and so if the city has you as either a renter or a property owner within 1,000 feet of the development, of the proposed development, then you should have gotten a mailer, but it's only as accurate as the city's mailing list. So we sent out 398 mailers, and that was sent out a couple weeks ago, and we've started to get some postcards back. So part of the mailer was we included a postcard in there for people to write comments and then submit those back. And I think we've gotten 7 postcards back. I've also gotten 5 phone calls from different people in response to this, and 1 email. So we're starting to hear from people, and we're excited to hear more from people. But this is not part of the city formal process yet. This is just us wanting to make sure that we've had a public process and really heard from the community before we get to the point where we're submitting an application. The idea is that once you submit an application to the city, you've sort of made at least a somewhat commitment about what it is you're intending to build, and we would rather have the public process before we've made a commitment about what it is we're intending to build on this site. So I guess I would take any questions on that bit, if there is any, and then what I'm going to do is share my desktop. So for those of you that have access to the computer, you can see the concept plans that Otto Condon, who's with ZGF, put together, and then Otto will walk through the sort of conceptual design. And I don't know if anybody else on the call, Dave, yourself included, have anything else you want to add that you think I missed, but if not, take questions on sort of the process stuff and then go into the first set of plans that we put together.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I only have audio, so I'm sorry that I can't see any presentation you have, but the main question I have is what is the extent of the development plans on that site? There are 3 main structures on that site. Do you intend to tear down all 3 and cover that entire area?
So the site itself actually doesn't include the liquor store or the Indian restaurant. I understand it's been a couple of different restaurants. It's just what is currently the Sonic site. So the only building that would be demolished would be the former Sonic restaurant. So it's a 16,500 square foot site that's essentially bound by the 2 drive aisles that are the parking area for the liquor store and the Indian restaurant and the other adjacent retail. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The only further question I would have is the parking spaces that bound are on the liquor store side and the Indian restaurant side. Are those going to remain, or are you merging into the parking lots a bit?
No. There's various easements and so forth, but the parking lots for the liquor store will not be touched on either side of their drive aisle. So they actually own the parking on the east and west sides of their drive aisle. That won't be touched. And the Indian restaurant owns the parking on the south side, or the side adjacent to their building, and that will not be touched either.
Okay. So to me, it sounds much smaller than I thought it would be. So are these units going to be pretty small? I mean, I know you're building up, but even then, it sounds like a small parcel for 12 units. And I noticed on the design you have some retail on the first floor.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, it's a point I forgot to make, so thank you for prompting that. Yeah, the units are pretty small, so they vary down to even less than 500 square feet. For some of them, I think the largest units are probably more like 1,100 square feet, but they're all small. And the idea is that if we're have a larger communal space, then the individual units can be relatively small, and that's part of sort of keeping the ecological footprint small, as well as keeping the cost of the units and the affordability of the development relatively low. And I forgot to mention that in addition to the housing, we do have a proposal to do roughly, in the current plan, it's shown, I think, roughly 1,800 square feet of ground floor retail fronting Petaluma Boulevard. That, truth be told, if we have the resources to do it, we ultimately would love that to be a cidery where we use Gravenstein apples to try to make cider in that site. And then facing on Payran Boulevard, the ground floor are proposed as work-live spaces. Those are spaces for which we don't have people identified to go into them. So we really are hoping that we can attract community members, artists, people who have service industries and so forth, who really do want to do work as their primary component of the use of that space. I know that live work has been, I think, largely live thus far in Petaluma, and we're hoping to change that and make them largely work with a live component for those 4 units that would face Payran And then the third building would be sort of in the center of the block. And the ground floor of that is the common space, is a kitchen for the use of everybody in the community, a dining area that would probably have multiple uses as a co-working space, an entertainment space, and then there's also a workshop, essentially a maker lab kind of space that's available to everyone, as well as an exercise room in the current set of plans.
So is it planned for then 12 individuals total, or do you know how many people total would be living there?
I don't know the number of people. There's 12 to 13 dwelling units, and my wife and I would occupy one of those, and we're two people. So I don't know what the average occupancy per dwelling unit would be, but it's 12 to 13 dwelling units, and that includes the work live.
Okay, so you plan to live there?
Yeah, I plan to live there. I'm hoping that my oldest son Taylor is on the line here. I have two more who are also grown. I'm hoping that they will come live with us. We both, my wife and I, both have aging parents who are from the Bay Area. We're hoping they will come live with us. And yeah, it is. There are units that we would love to have others from Petaluma join us in community, but this is also our home, or we hope it will be our home.
Okay. I've lived in Petaluma 35 to 40 years, so I really have a sense of the city and what is good about it and what's bad about it. Kind of. I just mentioned that because then I'll just give you my impressions for someone who's been here a long time. I live around the corner on Roca Drive in that development there, and to me, it sounds like a very exciting, wonderful unit. The only question I have is, do you think you're going to run into some issues because it's 3 stories, right? It's 3 floors.
It is 3 floors, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the only question I would have about that, and it sounds like you may need to get a variance from the planning commission or the city council. You've probably thought about that.
3 floors is, zoning for this parcel is up to 30 dwelling units per acre, 37, I think, once you've met the inclusionary housing requirements, and then height limit of 45 feet. And Otto, correct me when I go astray.
It's actually 30 feet, but
30 feet.
By the development process up to 35 feet. So 2 of the buildings are 35, 1 is 30.
Yeah. So, but we're not expecting that. So what we're proposing largely fits within what the city's zoning calls for. But I think your point is good that there may be some concerns about a 3-story development. There are other 3-story residential developments. I actually don't know if they're in this block, but the blocks to the north, there are.
Right. Exactly. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's the only comments I have. I really like what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of exciting, and I'd like to learn more about it.
Cool.
And I'm glad that the liquor store is going to be retained in that block, because that's kind of a local fixture, and so it's part of the neighborhood. I'm glad that's not going to go away.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked to Barry a couple times, and yeah, we're not intending to displace him.
Yeah, we don't call it a liquor store. We call it a quick stop.
Okay.
Because there's other things there. Okay.
I will change my jargon when referring to that.
Yeah, thank you. A little prejudicial there.
So any other questions before I have Otto talk about the concepts that we put together as part of our due diligence work?
Thank you. This is Karen again, and I have sort of some preliminary kinds of questions just to help me figure out what it is, so I can, when you come into your presentation, I can better place it into my brain. First of all, you said that the zoning is 37 units with inclusionary, and it sounds like since you're doing micro units, it's certainly going to qualify for inclusionary, right? Because I would think those are going to be low rent. 37 units per acre. How many acres is this lot?
The lot is
slightly less than half.
Yeah.
So it's 16,000 square feet. So it's slightly less than half an acre.
And did I get the acre, what the inclusionary bonus is 37 dwelling units per acre? Is that right, Otto?
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And right now
Thank
you're looking at 2 of the units being inclusionary or matching the inclusionary requirements.
Thank you. Okay, and then I'm wondering, you said that it used to be, I've only been here 12 years. It used to be a hamburger stand, a Sonic.
Yeah, it was a Sonic fast food restaurant, the kind where they brought food to your window and hung the tray from your window. If you remember those?
Sure. I thought maybe it was an A&W because it looks like it has the setup for that type of thing. So were you the landowner and the restaurant operator, or just the landowner?
We just bought the property 2 months ago. So, we didn't operate the restaurant. And the restaurant had been vacant, I think, for a number of years. I don't know exactly how many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then let's see here. Where do you live now?
So we're Bay Area residents. My wife is from San Francisco. I've been in the East Bay for the last 35 years, but we were both just did a stint in Washington, D.C. and literally just drove into town today on a cross-country trip returning. So we're living in Napa at the moment until this development is complete, if we're able to complete it, and then we'll be living in Petaluma.
Okay, so because I just checked you guys out on Corporation Wiki, and it says that you're heavily into real estate, and you're from Oceanside, the East Coast, Texas, that you have lots of business interests, but maybe this isn't all the same Matthew Ridgway. Does that sound right?
That's not the same Matthew Ridgway. There's no E in Ridgway, but it is a fairly common name. No, this is the first development I ever will have done. It's intended, we're going to intend to live there. So yeah, and this is the first LLC I've ever formed. So we're sort of cutting our teeth on this.
Okay, and let's see here. So I get the concept, and I know Dave Alden, and I see that he's a consultant on this project. So I always like to go with the story of how this came to being, and I understand you just bought it. I understand that it's been vacant for a long time, and it needs somebody to come love it. I can't imagine, pardon me for saying this, that you haven't noticed that there are a heck of a lot of homeless type people that congregate right there and in fact live in the entryway.
Yeah.
And then I look and I see this is pavement and there's a lot of traffic. And I wonder, after that, I can't imagine, it's a little bit of a stumbling block for me, trying to imagine how you and your family, if they commit to be there or if not. Let's say that worst case scenario, you guys don't actually make it into there and you've got 13 tenants, fine. But it's so much pavement right now and there's no trees there right now to give you privacy and, noise abatement and oxygen. So I guess you'll get into that with the development, but I just am hopeful, yet also caring about what the heck, how you guys could live there.
Yeah, so we can talk about when we talk about the development, but we've been thinking about this for a couple of decades, as I said earlier, and when I say we, I mean my wife Dawn and I, and we've contemplated various locations throughout the Bay Area. I initially wanted to be either in the Iron Triangle area of Richmond or areas of West Oakland, areas where there are communities of need. Part of the idea behind the work-live space and the co-housing in general is just that we would love to be in a place where we can provide jobs and housing opportunities for people who and communities that are less fortunate. And so, yeah, so the fact that there are people sort of hanging out on the site is not a deterrent for us. The fact that there's an affordable housing project relatively nearby is also not a deterrent. Those are all sort of, we look at those as positives, that those are potential people who can participate in our, either in the commercial aspects or in the housing aspects of this facility. We ended up in Petaluma specifically. I agree with you. It's always nice to hear the story because Dawn and I both love Petaluma. I worked in Petaluma for a number of years as a transportation planner consultant. So I wrote your current general plan and your traffic impact fee program and developed the city's travel demand model and worked on some traffic calming projects and the like. And so got to know Petaluma well. My father lived in Cotati when I was a kid, and so I spent a fair amount of time in that area of Sonoma, not specifically in Petaluma, but just north. And so, yeah, it just struck us as a place that met our criteria in terms of having some edginess about it that we can contribute to, as well as being a place that we wanted to live.
Okay. Okay, I see that now. Farron Piers. Yes, you guys did the traffic study for increasing my little 1/10 of a mile street from 1,000 cars a day to 3,000 cars a day. But it wasn't you that recommended it. It was the M Group. So I am familiar with your name.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm one of the principals at Farron Piers, and I've been there for 25 years. But I haven't, as I said, I've been in Washington, D.C. for the last 4 years. And so my work has primarily been in the East Coast over the last 4 years. So.
Okay, so let me just ask one more question. Are you guaranteeing that you're going to live in 600 square feet, or is this just your way of scooting in a project to get renters?
No, the units vary in size from less than 500 to up to 1,100. But if you're familiar with relationships, you know that they're always compromised. My wife is here willing to join me in this venture, but she would like a larger unit. So yeah, one of the units that we are looking at is one that is 1,100 square feet for ourselves, and we absolutely want to live here. We're not developers. We're not doing this for profit. We're doing this to create a community that we want to live in, and because we have children who can never afford, as I can't imagine any child could, to buy Bay Area homes, and we have parents who are getting older, and need to be cared for, and so yeah, this is really this is personal, and if it ends up being a site that we don't intend to live in, I think we would probably just not build it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much, Matthew.
With that, Otto, I'm going to call up so I'm going to share my desktop for those of you that can see it, and then let Otto walk us through the concept plans in their current state. I want to make sure I share. So these are we did have a meeting with the Development Review Committee as a city staff. It's each department is represented, and these are the plans that we presented to them in advance of actually purchasing the property. We wanted to essentially make sure that if we bought this thing, it's at least likely that we could build it, the project that we'd like to build. So Otto, which portions do you want me to zoom in on?
Well, you can. Thank you, Matthew. And within the context of the questions asked, I'll try to focus, since this is a small group, also responding to some of your concerns and questions. And as Matthew mentioned, this was the first due diligence concept, and through this and the brief meeting with the city, and I should say I'm a principal in ZGF, which is an architecture firm with offices in Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, Vancouver, BC, Washington, and New York. And we do focus on smart growth, sustainable design. We actually did the initial concept studies for the Petaluma Smart Station. And that's one of the reasons Matthew's both a friend and colleague. We've done smart growth projects together.
We got you on because you're a good friend of mine also.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the folks that we're hiring are good friends.
Yeah. And I'll say as an architect, having a client who it's great because this is like a dream project that he plans to live in. So it's not, I will say it's not, typical developer driven. It's actually aspirational. So with that, Just to review the site, the corner, it right now is pretty bare with the exception of the restaurant building. And one of the drivers is to really make it, understanding it's a corner, it's a little busy, to create a residential complex that is reads with the right scale. It's actually a series of 3 buildings, so that the scale is broken down. It also has the way it can be treated will start to define a character more in context and scale with Petaluma. And from a development point of view, as I mentioned, the site is 16,000 square feet, a little less than half an acre. The actual allowable development is 2.5 times that, and the FAR. The actual development of this is only about 15,000 square feet, so it's about 0.87. So it's less than half that's actually allowed as of right. So I think that's critical to point out. The site that's showing here is the first floor, and these 3 buildings are really clustered around a green courtyard in order to address some of your questions about, because this is a busy corner. And the first floor is intended to be more active in relation to the streets, with the retail facing Petaluma and the 100% corner of Petaluma and Payran, with the opportunity for cafe seating. And the work loft space, which faces Payran, is really 4 units that would be built with a 20-foot floor to floor, with the opportunity to have lofts, a half loft, so that you could also have it could be either a living space, or it could even be additional workspace. But the idea is that these would be, less intense retail, more, it might be artist space, service space, home industry, but really the intent to, support the economic growth of the adjacent neighborhoods. And then the third building is the residential amenity space, which, as Matthew mentioned, would be with the units ranging in size from, some guest rooms that are 250 square feet up to the 1,000 plus or minus for the townhouses. That is the communal kitchen area, which is really a critical component for co-housing or intentional living, so that you can reduce the size of the units and create more amenities in the outdoor space and the common space, and as Matthew mentioned, the exercise room and the workshop. And in addressing because this is a busy corner, and also we wanted to, as much restore some of the green aspects of the corner. We're also on this drawing showing enhanced streetscape. So increasing the number of trees along the streetscape, building stormwater planters, so that actually all the stormwater, instead of running and impacting the sewer systems of Petaluma, they will basically be captured into the tree wells or into the stormwater planters on site in order to mitigate some of the stormwater runoff. So I think right now there's maybe on the site about, I'm going to say there's 7 trees, but ultimately we will be doubling the number of trees, both on the street trees and also looking at some on-site trees near the parking and within the courtyard. We'll be increasing the pervious area, so we'll be which allows stormwater to basically recharge into the soil. So we'll be improving the amount of runoff, or reducing the amount of runoff. So again, we're trying to not only do no harm, but actually make an improvement. There are 12 parking spaces, 1 for each unit. We'll have dedicated bike space. The streetscape will include bike racks, so that it encourages multimodal transit. And going back to building up in the units, I think the other fascinating part about a program like this is in the Petaluma building, it is for town. You go to the next, actually above this, the space. It really does provide a mix of units, and so it's not just like, I say 12 of the same units. There is facing Petaluma, it's 2-story loft townhouses, which are really 1-bedroom lofts, with living on the ground floor and a loft unit above for like a master bedroom. The common building has two-story apartments, which could be 2-bedroom apartments each. And then there are 3 flats, which are studio flats, and then also 2 guest rooms, which are more like the micro units or the efficiency units. So they could be both guest units for residents or what guests. So, you know, in terms of the population, it's going to be more than 1 per unit, but it could accommodate small families, it could accommodate individuals or couples. And so I think it's going to provide the opportunity for a real mix of residents. And again,
real quick, just, one of the things about the flats is that this is an elevator building, and we're anticipating that we're going to develop the flats as accessible units, so particularly friendly to seniors and people with disabilities or mobility concerns. And then the other thing on the first page is just that as part of the streetscape project, we are hoping and have initial good indications from the city that we can add on-street parking on Payran.
Oh, yep. And again, on the second floor, which is really the heart of the residential units, there's a roof garden, as Matthew mentioned. It's intended to also potentially be a production garden for, you know, the residents to be able to grow tomatoes, herbs, whatever they want to grow in order to really make it more of an intentional community. And it's, you know, built with exterior walkway, so there's a real on this drawing it calls it the stoop, so it's a real, you know, living on the East Coast, it's like with the small row houses that you have out here, it's like you spend a lot of time sitting on the stoop and really getting to know your neighbors. And that was one of the inspirations, because that's one of the things that I think Matthew has grown to love about living on the East Coast, and also living in, you know, some of the neighborhoods in the East Bay. So the idea is to, and that's one of the things we're finding with the smaller units. If you create the more outdoor amenities and common spaces, that really is not only does it meet the affordability, but it also improves the social life of the residents. And then on the 3rd floor, the upper level roof, 2 of the buildings, as Matthew mentioned, will have solar photovoltaics in order to, you know, reduce the electricity load, and also make the units more affordable by reducing utility bills. There will be a common roof terrace, again, to just reinforce the social life of residents or support the social life. And then also looking at, you know, additional roof garden space for additional areas to grow, you know, food, whatever types.
In the most recent conversation, or the more recent conversations, I think we've talked about wanting to have more roof terrace area. Hence, what we showed is the solar PV roof green roof on the street on this building that faces Payran. I think in more recent concepts or considerations, we're looking at making that entire roof a roof garden, and just focusing the photovoltaic PV on the other 2 buildings.
And as this identifies, 2 of the buildings are 35 feet, which is within the existing code with approval from the planning director, and then the 30 feet, which is the base height limit. And you can see really with the roof terrace. Actually, if you let's just go to the next page. I think it really, again, these are the preliminary concept sketches really to do the test for, you know, how to build on a site such as this. And it's really intended to be a village of 3 buildings oriented around a central courtyard with southern exposure, with trees that provide shade and also soften the edge. You know, diagrammatically, the idea is that this shouldn't be read as one larger project, but with a variety of materials, exterior building materials. It can read as more of a cluster of 3 different buildings. And I think if you scroll down not quite to this section, actually, this actually also shows how just the variety of units that there's what we call townhouse lofts above the Payran building, above the retail. There's the 2-story townhouses, which are essentially 2-bedroom units, and then the flats, and then also the work loft area, which could be the residential, the workspace, all wrapped around and oriented towards the interior courtyard for the residents. But they will also have exterior, a lot of glazing and balconies, so they'll also provide eyes on the street for the neighborhood. So, with the concerns about homeless or vagrancy, I think part of the value of a project such as this is that it can, the added eyes in the street and the residents and the life will basically help to overall improve the stewardship of the neighborhood. And then if you just want to go to the next one, one of the things about the construction, and Matthew touched on it, about an ecological approach to the buildings. Well, first we were, the silo, while it's perhaps the exterior may be in some disrepair. I mean, there's some beauty to the history of the silo and its place in Petaluma. So we actually thought that was a great inspiration in thinking of how, we could do an architecture that's complementary, contemporary, and that in looking at the site, it really is on the edge of the downtown and sort of where the agricultural area started. So that's one of the kind of design drivers for how the architectural will develop. In looking at the materials, talking with Matthew, it was like he was really interested in a post and beam structure, wood, exposed wood, so it's really tactile and warm and more natural. And what we're looking at and talking to various industry reps, such as an organization called Woodworks, is a mass timber, or it's cross-laminated timber, which is prefabricated wood panels that are structural. It can be built faster, and it also allows you to expose the wood because the way it's built, it's actually fireproof. And it's really an emerging industry, globally and nationally. And it's opportunity for job growth also, especially in the West Coast. And so we're really looking to use that for the to really provide the aesthetic appearance. So it's not all just sheetrock in both the retail ground level units and in the residential units. And these are some photos. It's a project up in Portland that uses CLT. So you can see that, you'll be able to get wood ceilings. You can have wood floors. You do have the panels. We're looking at some prefabricated panel systems built potentially or manufactured in Sacramento. And again, while it also is an emerging technology in some ways, it also will, if we do go this route, it'll help in terms of impacts during construction because it can be more efficient. On the exterior, we are looking at more a contemporary industrial experience with the combination, interested in looking at the metal siding, maybe some wood siding, and that's what we're still developing. That will be included in the city submission package. But again, a little more contemporary, and also using the multiple buildings to really break down the scale of the project and provide a little more variety, so it doesn't read as just one larger project. And that is pretty much a broad overview.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Otto. So we have about, I'm willing to stay as long as people want. I think we had initially thought this was about 60 minutes, but so we have at least 10 minutes, and as long as people want. But we would field any more questions, and I'm happy to zoom into different images if people want to talk about any specific design elements.
Okay, I have a question again. This is Taryn. All right, so this is going to be for your family to live in, and you're going to have a shared kitchen and a shared gym and an amenity space. What's the amenity space?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question part, the amenity space?
Yeah, what is the amenity space?
Okay, yeah. So I should clarify that even the small units, all of them will have at least a micro kitchen and an individual bathroom in them. So if people want to prepare their own meals in their units, they'll have the ability to do that. The amenity space is a large kitchen for communal use, and then we're anticipating that there's going to be um, sort of a big room on probably the sort of the end of that building that's sort of closer to Petaluma Boulevard that is a dining room and then doubles as a co-working space during the day. We might use it as a hangout space during other times. So it'll be sort of a flexible room, and that'll probably be the largest component of the amenity space. And then in the middle of the building there, that's sort of where the kitchen is. And then behind the kitchen, getting on towards the quick stop is where we'll have an exercise room as well as a workshop, essentially a wood and metal shop where community members can use their hands to build things. And then there also is a small amount of storage. Since each of the units is small, I think each unit will have a small storage space as well. So just acknowledging that there won't be a lot of storage in the units. So that's what we're envisioning for the amenity space. And then that's only the interior amenity space. I think the larger component of the amenity space is actually all the outdoor gardens.
Up on the roof, right?
Up on the roof and on the second floor. Actually, every floor has some element of garden, but the roof is definitely the biggest one.
Okay, and again, pardon me, because there's a pattern of developers, any developer really, coming into Petaluma and misrepresenting things off the bat, saying that things are there for their families, and then they convert them into like little Airbnb units and rent them out to maximize their revenue stream. And while I'm happy to believe that you as a business owner and your wife are going to be happy living on that corner among the homeless in 1,000 square feet, what guarantee would the neighborhood have that this isn't just a way of making it through the permit process and then converting it to like a residential motel and bringing in different types of people and having it just completely transform from the lovely, wholesome family vision that we started with?
Yeah, I don't know what guarantees there are, but I mean, I guess I would just point out that the development proposal that we're putting forward here is not actually the most economical development proposal that could be put forward. I mean, we're talking about building out of materials that are quite nice, and we're if I was in this to make money, we would not be building 3 separate buildings that look different from one another and different building materials. We would build this much more efficiently. So, I mean, I guess I would ask you to look at what we're proposing and use that as a guide for whether you think this is a bait and switch. It is not. As to the size of the units, my wife and I, before we moved to DC, had been living in West Berkeley, and we live in a 490 square foot unit. So we don't mind living in small units.
Okay. All right. Me too. I'm happiest in a small unit. So I would get that answer. Thank you. Okay. So now stepping back, looking at that corner now, I'm wondering, what is it that you conjure up in your mind? Like, do you see like really tall sycamore trees to make it more lush, or do you see like trees that cap out at whatever 16 or 20 feet, like a crepe myrtle? I'm really curious as to like your vision, because it's kind of an eyesore, that whole corner, with the exception of the beautiful mill and what Wishbone has done. They've really put love into their property. But of course, what's going on there now on the property you bought certainly doesn't look loved. And so in terms of potential for investment potential of extending sort of downtown up northward to make it more vibrant up here, and we've got Acre Coffee up here now. We've got a nice record store. We've got Wishbone. I'd really love to get an image in my mind of what it looks like standing back. I see your drawings, but if you could talk me through that, I'd certainly really appreciate it.
Okay, I will say that I'm not a landscape architect, and when I think about this, I don't necessarily think about the buildings or the trees on the outside. I think about the interior courtyard and what I want that to look like. And we've talked a lot about wanting to plant apple trees, Gravensteins if we can grow them there. And I'm sorry, Otto, espalier, help me out.
Espalier, yeah, espalier for like the southern perimeter of the site. We're looking at espalier apple trees, so it not only kind of reflects the local agricultural industry, it also reflects Matthew's aspirations for growing apples to make cider with. And so there's about 4 layers, I would say, of landscape. And there's the courtyards. Well, there's the ground level courtyard. There's the roof gardens that provide that more intimate, I'll say the most private of landscape for the residents. And then with the perimeter of the buildings, we're looking at espalier, living fences essentially. And then around the site, we've actually created setbacks in order to create landscape between the sidewalk and the building frontage on 3 of the edges. And then also looking at significantly enhancing the landscape in the streetscape by building, continuous tree wells that'll manage the stormwater and increasing the number of trees along the street. And actually, Bob, if you can weigh in, Bob is our landscape architect that works with us, and he's actually lives and works out of San Francisco and grew up in, I'm going to say this wrong, Sebastopol, right? So also a native son of the area. But Bob, if you want to kind of talk about the trees.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Wood. I am the landscape architect on the project, and I work out of San Francisco. My family lives in Santa Rosa, and we grew up in Sebastopol in the 70s, and we have gone back and, we're that. What we are doing is we are planning on using the Petaluma street tree program to plant big street trees along Payran and along Petaluma Boulevard North to screen and to provide shade and color along the streetscape. And that also helps bring the building scale down a bit and helps the buildings blend back into the area. And then, as you can see on the site plan here, there is foundation planting on the Payran side where you have the stoops or the work loft entries. Along the Petaluma Boulevard side, what's interesting is because of a series of easements for a gas line easement, there's some room out there to have, for the retail, to have the opportunity to have more seating, cafe seating, just like across the street, the development, they're doing a nice thing there that's very, very inviting. And so we would learn from what they're doing there, as well as what you guys have done in downtown, and are developing the retail and encouraging the retail because it has room to spill out into the sidewalk on Petaluma Boulevard to really develop that. And then along the south edge is the parking lot that remains. and we will be planting trees and having a series of, again, foundational or plantings along the walls of the buildings to soften that edge, to provide more shade, and to make that more inviting too. And then the courtyard and the roof gardens will be planted and developed for the users there.
Okay, thank you. That's nice.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Rick.
Go ahead, Rick.
I own the property at 830 Boulevard North. And I think that my biggest concern on the project right now is parking. And currently, I'm having to deal with parking issues as far as I have overflow from various properties, even though 1/3 of those are actually vacant. I have parking that comes from the low-income housing and the work-live spaces behind that they don't have enough parking, and they come over and use my parking lot. And so as this develops and so on, I'm supportive of what you're attempting to do, but I do have major concerns with your lack of parking and how that's going to affect me as far as having to deal with either towing or dealing with your lack of parking.
Yeah, well, you're spot on. Parking has been it actually was the thing that when we thought about not buying this parcel, it was because we were concerned about parking. So you're right. It's really hard to find enough parking spaces. It's one of the reasons that I think we started looking at how much space could we create on Payran itself to create some more on-street parking there. But even with those extra, I think we're going to get 5 spaces on Payran, and it seems like the city's acceptable or finds that acceptable. It's going to be tight on the parking. So we're looking at different mechanisms in terms of how it is we incent or disincent auto ownership in our development. So we're going to be, if you've heard of the term unbundling the parking so that people pay for the parking units separately from the actual apartments. And then we've also contemplated having some shared vehicles. But I will be perfectly honest that parking is a challenge, and so it's one that we're sort of open to other concepts and other ideas on how to do this more effectively. And so, yeah, we're very committed to making sure that we minimize impacts on adjacent residents and commercial properties, yourself included. And so I can give you my word that I'm willing to work with you, but I know that's not, you don't know me, so there's no reason for you to accept that. But we'll continue to do whatever we can to try to address the parking concern. And you're right, that is a concern.
Okay, yeah, like I said, as your project moves forward, assuming that it does move forward, then at some point I'll actually meet with you and kind of try to do my best to work with you, but I just can't afford at this point to I mean, the problems that I have right now are actually severe, and I haven't really decided how to address it other than contacting a tow company which I don't want to do, but it's got to the point where I pretty much am going to have to. And so I don't really believe the restaurant that's there now will survive. That's just my feeling of seeing the other restaurants come and go, but that's not really part of your situation or not. But that whole area is definitely a concern. So yeah, as we move forward, I'll be happy to talk with you just specifically about this and so on.
I appreciate that, and yeah, I'm very willing to talk to you about what we can, other solutions you come up with. I will say that we have approached a couple of the owners, including Barry and the people who own the parking lot for the grocery store across Payran, about leasing some spaces from them, and neither of them are willing to do that. So we've explored some options, and we'd love to find others.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I do bike ride past there and down there all the time. It's an extremely dangerous intersection. Lots of activity, lots of right-hand turns and left-hand turns. And I cannot possibly imagine any cars parking on Payran right there near the corner. It just seems like it would be a death trap. So I'd really watch that, because to look at it on the little picture, is much different than cycling on there several times a week. And in fact, my neighbors will not have forbid their children from cycling there. So if you put cars there, and in fact, some people keep biking there, they don't hop off their bike and then walk it because it's not bikeable, it's not safe bikeable. I think that that could be a real liability.
I appreciate the comment. There are currently 2 receiving lanes on Payran, so 2 lanes essentially heading eastbound, but there's only 1 lane coming across Payran, and there's only 1 lane, 1 southbound left turn off of Petaluma Boulevard onto Payran. So there's no reason to have 2 receiving lanes. So there's essentially room to narrow that to 1 receiving lane. You don't need 2 receiving lanes if there's only 1 turning into it or moving into it, and then also having on-street parking and a bike lane in that little section. So we are anticipating that there will be a bike lane there.
Yeah, okay, sure. That's going to be tough. I can tell you, people do the California stop, right turn all of the time. So
Okay.
regardless, red or green light. So again, in reality, boots on the ground rather than academic exercise, really a good way to go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And when we haven't designed it. So once we get to the point where we've actually got a design for that, I'd really welcome you to take a look and let us know what you think of it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's time, and this has been super helpful for us. So we'll let you all go since it's a work night, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.